In the autumn of 1945, shortly after Germany's surrender, a transport of German female prisoners of war arrives at a temporary processing camp in rural Pennsylvania. Among them are nurses, factory workers, and resistance members who had been captured during the final months of the war. As they await repatriation procedures, local American bakers, many of whom lost sons in the European theater, make an unexpected gesture of humanity. Rising at 4 a.m., they prepare dozens of fresh apple pies and serve them warm to the exhausted women at dawn. This simple act of kindness becomes a profound moment of reconciliation, challenging both sides to see beyond the uniform to the shared humanity underneath, and marking the beginning of healing in a world torn apart by years of conflict. A misty morning unfolded over rural Pennsylvania, the sun a mere ghostly presence behind a curtain of gray. The distant hum of diesel engines, heavy and monotonous, disrupted the tranquil, damp, and chilly air, signaling the arrival of a military convoy. It was the autumn of 1945, a time of transition where the echoes of war still resonated, yet the first whispers of peace began to emerge timidly. Trucks laden with German female prisoners of war advanced slowly along a dirt road, kicking up thick clouds of dust that mingled with the morning fog, lending an ethereal and somber atmosphere to the scene. The air was impregnated with a penetrating dampness and the earthy aroma of fallen leaves, which formed a multicolored silent carpet beneath the heavy tires of the vehicles, typical sights and smells of late Pennsylvania autumn. Inside the trucks, the silence was almost palpable, broken only by the creak of wood and the involuntary swaying of bodies. Women of different ages and backgrounds sat on wooden benches, rocking with the irregular and uncomfortable motion of the vehicle. Each jolt a brutal reminder of the present reality. Their faces, once expressive and full of life in other times and places, now reflected a deep and complex mixture of physical and mental exhaustion, apprehension for the unknown, and an almost defeated resignation. Some stared blankly at the wooden floorboards, their eyes empty, as if trying to disappear into the worn wood. Others, braver or more desperate, exchanged silent glances, seeking mutual comfort, a recognition of their shared humanity amid the overwhelming uncertainty that surrounded them. It was a loaded silence, more eloquent than any word. Anna Miller, a former nurse in her early 30s, kept her hands clasped in her lap, her knuckles white from the incessant pressure. A small scar adorned her right thumb, a souvenir of a superficial scalpel cut on some battlefield operating table. Her eyes, once filled with boundless compassion and a vibrant light, were now dark and opaque, indelibly marked by the memories of the unspeakable horrors she had witnessed on the Eastern Front, where life and death danced a cruel waltz. Beside her sat Liesl Schmidt, barely 20, a factory worker from Berlin, biting hard on her lower lip, desperately trying to suppress the uncontrollable tremor that ran through her slender body. Her blue eyes, once curious and full of youthful sparkle, were now wide and filled with tears, reflecting the pure anguish of the unknown stretching ahead. Margaret Bauer, a middle-aged woman with firm features denoting a life of difficult decisions and a piercing gaze that did not shy away from any obstacle, watched intently the passing landscape, blurred by speed and fog, through the small opening of the truck, a narrow slit to the outside world. Involved in the German resistance, her posture, even sitting on a hard bench, was one of resolute calm, a silent, unwavering strength. She served as an anchor, a point of stability and courage for the other younger and more frightened women around her, her presence a tacit promise of resilience. The weight of experience and struggle manifested in her aura, making her a figure of respect, and for some, of hope. The convoy finally stopped at a makeshift camp, which appeared to have been hastily set up in a former fairground. The canvas barracks, once used for joyful exhibitions and community events, had been crudely adapted to serve as precarious accommodations, their damp and stained surfaces telling stories of rains and cold nights. They were surrounded by barbed wire which somehow shimmered under the weak, hesitant light of the rising sun, a cruel reminder of their prisoner status. American soldiers, many of them still teenagers, with faces that should have been free of worries, watched the arrival of the women with expressions that varied widely, from naive curiosity to deeply rooted distrust, echoing the feelings of a nation freshly emerged from a bloody conflict. The prisoners disembarked from the trucks, their steps hesitant, under the watchful and heavy gaze of the guards. The damp, soft earth gave way under their tired feet, each movement a struggle against gravity and discouragement. They were then led, like a frightened flock, to a makeshift processing area, where their few and worn belongings were meticulously searched and catalogued with bureaucratic coldness. The language barrier, an invisible and impenetrable wall, made the process even more dehumanizing and frustrating. Harsh commands in English were met with confused and terrified glances, resulting in painful misunderstandings and visibly increasing the already palpable tension in the air, a thin layer of fear and resentment. On the other side of the camp, beyond the barbed wire fences and damp barracks, local residents gathered in small, dispersed groups, watching the scene with closed expressions and heavy hearts. Among them was Samuel Sam Thompson, a widowed baker in his 50s whose face, deeply marked by time and the irreparable loss of his only son in Normandy, displayed a poignant mixture of grief, mourning, and an almost unbreakable resentment. The war had taken everything from him, and now the enemy, though defeated, was at his doorstep. Beside him, Mary Lou Jenkins, a spirited woman in her 40s, known throughout the town for her legendary apple pies, watched the women with an expression of silent compassion, her brown eyes conveying an empathy that defied the prevailing bitterness. James Jimmy Carter, a young apprentice baker, nervously adjusted the woolen cap on his head, his fingers restless, as he watched the prisoners with a mixture of fascination and repulsion. His youth and inexperience made it difficult for him to process the overwhelming complexity of the situation. He turned to Mary Lou, his voice a whisper laden with doubt. "What do you think will happen to them?" Mary Lou sighed deeply, keeping her eyes fixed on the women who represented the personification of her nation's enemy. "I don't know, Jimmy, but I do know that we all have choices to make. Choices about how to react, how to live now that the war is over." Sam, who was close enough to overhear the conversation, grumbled in a harsh voice full of bitterness. Choices. They made theirs when they supported that damned regime. They brought this upon themselves. His words were loaded with the weight of his own personal tragedy. Mary Lou looked at Sam, her eyes soft but firm, unyielding. "Not all of them had a choice, Sam. Many were forced, many were children. And even if they did, can't we choose to be better? Can't we choose compassion instead of retaliation?" Sam looked away, the weight of grief and hatred fighting fiercely within him, a battle he fought every day since the fatal news of his son. Mary Lou's words, however, planted a seed, small and incipient, in his hardened heart. Meanwhile, in the makeshift camp, Anna helped Liesel settle into one of the canvas barracks, the smell of mold and damp earth hanging in the air. Liesel looked around, her young eyes filled with unshed tears, terror still very present on her face. "Anna, what will happen to us? Will we be punished? Will we be forgotten here?" Anna squeezed Liesel's hand, offering an encouraging, though visibly forced smile, trying to convey a hope she herself barely felt. "I don't know, darling, but we are in this together. We will find a way to get through this. Together we will be stronger." Margaret, who had overheard the conversation between the two women, approached them, her voice low but full of a silent authority. "We must stay strong. They expect us to be weak, to give up, but we won't give them that pleasure. We resisted before and we will resist now." Margaret's words brought a moment of determination, a flicker of renewed courage to the group, but uncertainty hung in the air like the fog that had not yet completely dissipated over the field. Outside, Sam observed the interactions between the prisoners and the soldiers, the gray and desolate scenery of the camp, reflecting the emptiness in his soul. He remembered his son, how young he was, full of life, with an easy smile and dreams so grand before being sent to war, to death. The excruciating pain of loss mingled with a burning rage he felt for these women, seen by him as representatives of the enemy who took his son, the last piece of his happiness. Mary Lou, sensing Sam's internal struggle and silent torment, placed a gentle and comforting hand on his hunched shoulder. "Sam, perhaps it's time for us to start healing. For all of us, for you, for me, for this town, for the whole world." Sam did not respond immediately, but Mary Lou's words echoed in his tormented mind, like a distant bell. He continued to watch the camp, the aroma of fresh bread from the bakery next door contrasting sharply with the almost palpable tension in the air, a bittersweet reminder of what was before and what had become. It was a battle of faith and humanity against the darkness of resentment. In the cold darkness preceding dawn, Sam's small bakery, with its old brick walls and steam-fogged windows, came to life. The rhythmic, comforting sound of dough being kneaded, like a pulsing heart, echoed through the cozy space, mixing with an almost magical aroma of yeast, spices, and the promise of a new day. Mary Lou, with her sleeves rolled up, revealing strong arms and an apron stained with flour, a trophy of her craft, skillfully worked the dough, her movements precise, full of purpose and passion. Jimmy, the young apprentice beside her, watched intently, trying to imitate her gestures with an almost childish seriousness. He was still learning the secrets of bread making, but his determination was evident in every attempt. Sam, the master baker, initially reluctant to participate in such an endeavor, was present, though he maintained an emotional distance, like a distant observer of a drama he did not fully comprehend. He watched in silence, his deep, tired eyes betraying the internal battle between the resentment that consumed him and the possibility of compassion he feared. Mary Lou broke the silence filled only by the sounds of the bakery, her voice soft but imbued with an underlying firmness. "Sam, I know this is hard for you, for all of us, for every soul who lost someone in this war. But perhaps, just perhaps, this small gesture can be the beginning of something larger, something that transcends the pain." Sam sighed deeply, running a hand through his thinning gray hair, a gesture of weariness. "I don't know, Mary Lou. I don't know if I'm ready for that. To forgive, to forget the pain." Mary Lou paused her work, the dough resting in her hands, and looked directly at Sam, her eyes conveying a clear and undeniable message. "No one is asking you to forget, Sam. The pain of your son is yours, and no one has the right to take it away, only to take a step towards healing. For all of us, for the future." Sam met her gaze, seeing the pure sincerity and unwavering hope that resided there. He nodded slowly, an almost imperceptible gesture, but one that represented a small surrender, picking up a rolling pin and, for the first time in a long while, began to work alongside them, the rhythm of the others easing his own. As the trio worked in comfortable silence, the bakery filled with a sweet, intoxicating aroma of cooked apples, cinnamon, and nutmeg, a scent that promised warmth and nostalgia. The comforting heat from the oven, an iron and fire giant, warmed the room, creating a cozy contrast to the biting cold outside. The apple pies, with their golden, glistening crusts, true culinary works of art, were carefully removed from the oven, one by one, and placed into cardboard boxes, ready for their unusual destination. With the first ray of sun painting the sky in pink and orange, a faint promise of a new day, Sam, Mary Lou, and Jimmy loaded the boxes of pies onto the delivery truck. The vehicle swayed slightly under the weight of the load, but also under the weight of unspoken emotions, expectations, and fears. They drove in thoughtful silence to the camp, each lost in their own thoughts, the pies in the back seats like silent witnesses to an unexpected journey. Upon arrival, they were met by surprised soldiers and cautiously curious prisoners of war. The women, still drowsy with disheveled hair and puffy eyes, were led to the dining area, anticipating the routine and bland morning ration. However, what they found was a sight that defied their darkest expectations. Simple wooden tables, adorned with steaming apple pies, each exhaling a heavenly scent. The shock and disbelief were palpable, like an invisible wave sweeping through the room. Some women covered their mouths with their hands, unable to process the image. Others exchanged confused glances, looking for an explanation. Anna, her eyes wide, heart pounding, whispered to Liesel, "This is unbelievable. What does this mean?" Liesel, with tears in her eyes that finally streamed down her face, replied in a choked voice, "I don't even remember the last time I saw an apple pie, or anything so beautiful." Margaret, ever the voice of reason with her sharp insight, observed with a glimmer in her eye, "Perhaps this is a sign, a small ray of hope amid all this darkness." The women sat down, still hesitant as if fearing the vision would disappear, but hunger and temptation were too strong to resist. They took slices of pie, the comforting warmth spreading through their tired bodies as the sweet and spicy flavor danced on their tongues, an explosion of forgotten memories and sensations. The initial silence was broken, not by words, but by the soft sound of forks scraping plates and deep sighs of contentment. A moment of pure, unexpected joy. Sam watched the scene from a distance, a strange, warm, and unfamiliar emotion beginning to spread in his chest. His eyes, once fixed on his own resentment, now gazed at the women. He saw the expressions of genuine pleasure and gratitude, the way they savored each bite, as if it were a precious and long-awaited gift. Something inside him began to soften, an imperceptible crack in the wall of resentment he had so carefully built over the years. Mary Lou approached one of the tables, trying to communicate with the women using basic German phrases she had laboriously learned from a dusty book, an effort that demonstrated her goodwill. Liesel, noticing the effort, smiled shyly, her first genuine smile in weeks, and responded in hesitant but clear English. "Thank you. This is very kind. Unexpected." Mary Lou smiled warmly, a kindness overflowing from her eyes. "You're welcome. We're happy to help." "Really?" The interaction drew the attention of other women, who, encouraged by Liesel's smile, began to join the conversation, using gestures and simple words to communicate, curiosity overcoming fear. The language barrier, though still present like a fine mist, began to slowly dissolve in the presence of empathy and mutual effort, a small miracle. Anna, feeling encouraged by the atmosphere of acceptance, shared in more fluent English. "I was a nurse. I cared for many soldiers from both sides of the war. Pain, I learned, knows no borders or flags." Margaret added, her voice resonating with the strength of truth. "I was part of the resistance. I fought against what my country became, against the monstrosities. Not all of us, not most of us, supported the regime that caused so much pain." The revelations brought a new understanding to the American bakers. Jimmy, who until then saw the women only as the enemy, began to see them as individuals with stories, with their own struggles, and above all, with a shared humanity. It was an epiphany for the young apprentice, demystifying the monster he had imagined. Sam, still watching, felt a soft, light hand on his shoulder. He turned slowly to see Anna, who extended a crumpled photograph of her family, the corners worn from constant handling. "I also lost someone. My younger brother. He was only 19, just like many of your boys." Sam looked at the photo, at the smiling face of a young man, and then at Anna, her eyes reflecting the pain he knew so well. The pain in her eyes mirrored his own. Without words, he nodded, a gesture of silent recognition, an acceptance of the shared humanity that united them in sorrow, transcending the divisions of war. The wall of resentment in his heart crumbled silently, brick by brick. In the days and weeks that followed this unexpected gesture, Sam's small bakery, once a mere landmark in town, became a vibrant hub of activity and collaboration. The smell of fresh bread and baked apples, which previously only punctuated the mornings, now lingered continuously, an olfactory invitation to the community. The German female prisoners of war, who had initially been viewed with deep distrust and even hostility by the local community, were now frequent, almost daily visitors, bringing not only their presence, but also a wealth of traditional recipes and captivating stories. From their homelands, the image of the enemy began to fade, replaced by that of individuals, each with their own complexity and humanity. Anna, with a lighter smile and a renewed sparkle in her eyes, spent the afternoon teaching Mary Lou the secrets of an authentic Apfelstrudel, a classic German dessert that combined tart apples and raisins in a perfect flaky pastry. The two women worked side by side in the bakery kitchen, laughing at their own mistakes and sharing culinary techniques that had been passed down through generations, their hands shaping the dough with a synchronicity that felt natural. Liesel, with her curious nature and an insatiable thirst for knowledge, learned from Jimmy the almost mystical art of making sourdough bread. Her small hands, once accustomed to repetitive factory tasks, mimicked his precise movements with contagious dedication and joy, each rising loaf in the oven a small personal victory. Margaret, with her ever-strategic and practical mind, who had once planned escape routes and resisted oppressive regimes, suggested organizing a community fair. The noble goal, to raise funds for war-affected families, not only American families who had lost loved ones, but also German ones, whose lives had been torn apart by the conflict. The idea was met with surprising enthusiasm, and soon everyone was involved in the preparations, the community uniting for a purpose that transcended borders. It was a giant step toward reconciliation. The fair, when it finally happened, was a resounding success, exceeding all expectations. Colorful stalls, meticulously aligned, displayed a tempting variety of mouth-watering baked goods, delicate crafts, and simple games that amused children and adults alike. Children of all ages ran and laughed, their innocent voices filling the air with long-forgotten joy, while adults, once strangers, conversed and shared stories, the distance between them shrinking with each word. Music filled the vibrant air, a harmonious blend of cheerful American melodies and melancholic German folk songs, symbolizing the newfound union of the two cultures, a chorus of humanity. Sam, observing the scene from afar, a gentle smile on his face, felt a profound and lasting peace he hadn't experienced in years, a sensation that spread like a balm through his tormented soul. He realized with crystalline clarity that although the searing pain of loss would never completely disappear from his heart, the ability to forgive, to find humanity in others, even in those once considered enemies, could bring a form of healing, a silent redemption. Mary Lou approached him, holding 2 generous slices of apple pie, their golden crusts gleaming. "I think we did it, Sam. It wasn't easy, but we did it. You did it." He smiled, a genuine smile full of gratitude, taking the offered slice, the aroma of apple and cinnamon filling his nostrils. "Yes, Mary Lou, I think we did it. You taught me that kindness is always the best choice." They sat together on a wooden bench, savoring the pie as the sun majestically set, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange, pink, and purple. The sweet aroma of apple and cinnamon lingered in the air, no longer just a smell, but a vivid reminder of the power of simple gestures, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unwavering capacity of the human heart to heal and find hope. Even in history's darkest times, the war had ended, and with it a new era of understanding and compassion began, one slice of apple pie at a time. News of the baker's kindness and the fair's success spread, not only through the small town, but across the entire state, and eventually reached the ears of military authorities. It was a story that offered a welcome counterpoint to the narrative of retaliation and vengeance. Some residents, inspired by the example, began to see the prisoners in a new light, their faces previously etched with anger, now revealing glimpses of curiosity and, for some, even sympathy. Others, however, remained resentful, their wounds too deep to be healed by apple pies and smiles. "It's a betrayal," they shouted in bars and town squares. "How can we forget what they did?" These voices, though a minority, were strident and cast shadows over the burgeoning reconciliation. The bakers, however, were undeterred. Mary Lou, with her gentle persistence, organized weekly baking sessions for the prisoners of war, turning the initial gesture into an ongoing commitment. The smell of fresh bread and baked goods became a constant presence in the camp, a tangible reminder that kindness could be repeated, strengthening the bonds that were forming. Other residents, inspired by the dedication, began to contribute, bringing German books, warm clothes for the approaching winter, and other essential items, following Sam and Mary Lou's example. A web of small acts of generosity began to form, weaving a new social fabric. The German women, in turn, brought not only their hands to help, but also a cultural exchange. They taught the bakers traditional German recipes, from dark, dense rye breads to delicate, fragrant cookies, with complex names and memorable flavors. The bakery kitchen became a laboratory of tastes and a bridge between nations. Music and dance became shared activities on camp evenings, filling cultural gaps and fostering a pure, simple joy that transcended language barriers. German songs were sung timidly by the prisoners, and Mary Lou, with her good humor, taught them American songs, creating a harmonious chorus of voices that echoed in the cold Pennsylvania night. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were challenges and setbacks. A group of disgruntled residents, led by a man who had lost 3 brothers in the war, vandalized the camp fence in a nocturnal protest, spray-painting messages of hatred and resentment against what they saw as outrageous favoritism. Sam, seeing the damage the next morning, felt an old anger simmer. But this time, the anger was not directed at the German women, but at the blindness of hatred. He confronted the vandals with a calmness that surprised everyone, defending the acts of kindness and emphasizing the shared humanity he had learned to embrace through hard experience. "It's not about forgetting," he said, his voice firm. "It's about not letting the war turn us into the monsters we fought." Finally, the day of repatriation arrived. The prisoners of war received news of their imminent return home, a bittersweet announcement. There was a palpable relief, a renewed hope of seeing their families again, but also a veiled sadness at leaving a place that had unexpectedly offered healing and humanity. The farewell scenes were filled with restrained emotion, tight hugs, sincere promises to write, and the exchange of small gifts. A dried flower from Anna to Sam, a small rag doll made by Liesel for Jimmy, an embroidery from Margaret to Mary Lou. Small gestures that carried the weight of a friendship forged in the most improbable circumstances. Sam stood alone in the now empty camp, the wind whistling through the abandoned canvas barracks, a melancholic and distant sound. He reflected on the improbable journey that had taken him from the abyss of hatred and grief to the shores of understanding and forgiveness, a journey paved with the smell of apples and cinnamon. He returned to his bakery, the silence inside profound. In a gesture laden with symbolism, he placed a photograph of the German women, taken at the fair, beside his son's worn photograph on the shelf above the oven. The image of his son, an American soldier, and the German women, once enemies, now coexisted in silent harmony, side by side. It was a testament to reconciliation, to the healing he had found, and to the humanity he had rediscovered. The sweet, promising scent of yeast lingered in the air, a constant reminder that, even after the most violent storms, life finds a way to flourish again, and that love and compassion are, ultimately, the greatest healing forces. The bakery, once just a workplace, had become a sanctuary of hope, a monument to the resilience of the human spirit and the ability to find beauty in the most unlikely of places. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more content like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below.